So the 2021 consolidation, 2020-2021 consolidation of our thinking basically resulted in these things: a defined path forward. All right, so but also the theory of change on an organizational level was one of the clearest ways for us to define what we were doing. And many people do it just to get, because it's a requirement of funding or it's a requirement, but it is actually a really important process to do and keep doing, to keep reassessing it. We then have harmonized our strategic plan for 2022. We had strategic plans every single year previously, but it allowed for us to actually really put it within the framework and have a much better kind of understanding of the key, how all the puzzle pieces kind of like fit together. And that then made it easier for us to create the annual plan for 2022 and for the subsequent application that we did last year. And just to show you the theory of change that we put together, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. It doesn't have to be, it just has to be done. So you just have to really think about, what are you trying to do? What are your goals? How are you going to achieve those goals? What are the activities that are going to be, and what phases are those activities going to result in? So if you do what X, Y happens, and then what happens after that? And then what do you ultimately want to achieve? So as you can see, it's not the most pretty of anything, but it still has been incredible in allowing us to kind of, allowing us to define where we are and where we want to go, and how everybody else within our community sits within the activities and the programs that we do. We'll get there, but first of all, I just want to say, like, by doing that, you have to look backwards to move forwards. You have to understand your environment. You have to keep visiting your problem, because you might not, in the end, you might not actually end up doing what you personally want to do, but you have to keep on reviewing it so that you end up doing what is needed to be done to achieve the outcomes and what you want to achieve. So even there's a lot of self-reflection, but also community reflection. Review your strengths, review those of your communities, constantly review the need and the challenges. So even though you feel like you have a solution, there's always another way to do it. As you can see, we've always found different ways to innovate and to move and shift the different programs forward so that they are constantly evolving as the community evolves as well. And so that we can also draw newer people in. So there's a prioritization also in the way that we work. And you must check your assumptions. So you can assume something, but unless you ask that person, or unless you can look at the data to see whether that absolutely happens, there's no point in just an assumption. There are rude words about what assumption means, but basically it just an idea, and sometimes it can become reality, but it will only be an idea until you check it. So we came up with our goals. Our goals are to provide multiple ways to reduce the barriers for individuals and groups to contribute their knowledge, and to build capacity of a network of leaders across Africa and developing communities. So we're very much in kind of like a support and a program management and offering kind of position, but we're not in any way kind of like interfering with any of the other, how the communities work. And because we had this basically 8 years of experience of working across these things, we were very lucky to look back with that experience that we have and be able to isolate exactly how we worked, exactly where we worked best, but also how we could achieve what we could do with what we had, which is the community and the programs and that kind of collateral. So if we do the goals, so these are basically the strategies we came up with. If we do this, which are goals 1 and 2, which correlate with goal 1 and 2, And we concentrate on these elements. So sorry, I changed your middle column. We have too many activities and things by which we can achieve those things. But we wanted to focus, these are the elements that we feel are the core global issues at the moment that we feel that the Wikimedia community can help to resolve. So they're gender equality, representation, youth activation, access to skills, and community development is part of that whole thing. It's not a massive issue in itself, but it still is a way of achieving those other focuses. And then in the long run, you can see what the impact is about closing those, but basically developing a self-sustaining community that is autonomous and has its own motivations, and that we don't interfere with in any way. So what are our learning lessons? If you look at our grant page, we've got like hundreds, because they're basically per each of the project has its own. But I just wanted to use like the Wiki Loves Africa one. So 3 of the learning questions were, what are the photographers' journeys? So we have all of the metrics that we gather every year, and they are huge and they're important for us to show how they go, but it doesn't delve deeper into what is happening in, so we can throw like thousands of images, and we can throw that, that basically we've I think by now we've passed the 1 billion mark for all of the images from Wiki Loves Africa to have been viewed on Wikimedia projects. And that's only something like I think it's 14% of the images that have been submitted to Wiki Loves Africa are actually on Wikipedia pages illustrating them. But of those, there have been 1 billion views. So there's these huge metrics that we can come because we're dealing with Wikimedia. But ultimately, what is the true human cost? What is the true impact that we're making? And that is kind of like things like, what is the photographer's journey? Like in Africa, there's a very small amount of professional photographers because there just isn't that career choice for them. So when, and that's not just us, that's also people like World Photo Contest. They also, World Press Photo, they also only have 2 to 3% of their international global competitions have African submissions to them. And that's because there just isn't this support. But there's also not this development. There's no development in that. So when we get like selfies and all sorts of photographs that come in, but we get these magnificent photographs as well. And so how do we then help on the scale that we do is to develop photographers so that we have better quality coming in, better representation of Africa, but also layering in better support from a professional point of view to help raise the profile of African photographers. So it's a kind of like you have to constantly, in that way, we started by wanting to have Africa better represented visually on Wikipedia. But ultimately, there are other ways. And that's what I'm saying. You must constantly interrogate what you are doing, why you are doing it, and who benefits from it, because there are many ways that Africa, it's not just about the photography, and it's not just about basically the images being on Wikipedia. There are huge benefits and have been to it continuing. What do photographers need to contribute beyond the contest? And then what do experienced organizers need to increase their impact for their community? So as a result of that, we're doing surveys and personal accounts through interviews, but sorry, I was in a bit of a rush. I didn't kind of delve deeper, but as a result, we've also done things like, at the moment, we're hosting open office every week, both in English and French, in order to make sure that organizers have the support that they need during the time that the contest is on. We also host webinars, and we do special kind of sessions as well. So there's all of those kind of things which have come from supporting the organizers better, just to understand. And that comes from metrics and getting feedback every year from the organizers to find out what they need. We did a poll in February about what communications elements are the most useful, so that we can prioritize the work that we do as well in order to help support the organizers. And budgets and investments and whatever. This is not an easy task. And I have to say, like, I know that many of you are on a whole range of different experiences, so I don't want to, again, assume anything. But if you're starting or you're just coming out of the rapid grant stage, just start small, basically find out who your community is, what strengths you have within your community. So if you have somebody who's good at communication, somebody who's good at event organizing, just make sure that you find those people and gather that. We have a whole thing on how to run those kind of elements, but start small. Don't be too, you can have a big vision, like a very ambitious vision, but it only starts with small steps to get there. You can't kind of leap or teleport to that vision, and you can't expect anyone to support you if you can't. It's like doing a maths problem. You have to show the workings before people will allow you to say, yes, you got it right. Sorry, I have a teenage son. So also, again, don't rely on Wikimedia Foundation funding. It's as important to get, if you can, support. And I don't mean like as in monetary support, but you can get all other kinds of support as far as, and many who have worked with us know this. You can work with cultural institutions like the Goethe Institute or Alliance Française or others in order to support because they're aligned in their mission, or that there's a benefit to them to having more people in their libraries or in their spaces. Great places to activate. And if you can leverage those kind of partnerships, you don't need the funding for venues and for data if they have that space. Although some of that money might then realistically go on keeping the lights on or generators, which is what happened with Wiki Loves Women in Nigeria because of the grid issues. And so, you just have to be realistic. Don't expect volunteers to do boring jobs. Like, seriously, they are not going to. They're just, life is too short. If you make sure that you have some kind of stipend in order to get those kind of like administrative stuff done, nobody wants to go out and kind of like crunch the numbers or do the reports or whatever, but you have to do it and it has to be done. So make sure there's some kind of provision for that, even if it's not financial. It could be some support in other ways. So it could be like for the data access or for something like that, or I don't know, skills development or things like that. Be realistic, be honest, and put in the hard work. And you've also got to prove yourself to the local and global community. Just because you put in an application, it doesn't mean that people know who you are or understand your intention. So be as obvious as you can, I think, in whatever you're trying to do. Don't assume that people know what you're doing because they're not in your brain. So just be as obvious, rather provide more too much. And I know it's not possible always with the kind of like the very limited word counts that are on the application form, but we decided that by having our own kind of, this was our annual plan and linking it. So if you need to have like a space for more information, or you don't feel that there's always another place that you can put information and link that. That's just a side trick. Don't tell the Wikimedia Foundation guys about that. And that's it. I think I've covered all the points, I'm hoping. I don't know what goes on now.
Fantastic. No, Isla, that's so valuable. Thank you so much. And we're so excited to also hear from you as a sharer and colleague of all the proposals that are going to be talked about now. So the next...
one more question. Sorry, I have one more thing.
Oh,
Do
wonderful.
not be shy. Sorry, do not be shy to share your challenges and your failures. Please, it's much. Do not feel shame having to come forward and acknowledge that you don't know something or don't understand something, or like the Wikimedia, the Wikiverse is so huge. It is ginormous. Nobody knows like what's going on all of the time. You can't be a developer and an educator and a event organizer and a whatever and know those things like inside out. So ask, but also if things happen, we know that if you're from the MENA kind of area, our lives are very kind of tenuous. There's a lot of kind of instability somewhere. You know, everyone understands in our area and will understand if you can't, that it's not something you can control. So rather be as honest as possible and be upfront about it so that you can make a difference about that. I think it's we get into trouble when we feel like we have to be quiet or we have to be coping or we have to be as professional as possible. And that doesn't get anywhere, doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us kind of like people, if you go silent, people just worry about what's happening for you and then they get cross because they don't understand and they can't access you. Okay, so that's the other thing. So just be as open and kind of like honest about it as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. That's such an important message, and reiterate